owned by a toy company, that can be bad. But it turned out Bandai basically said, look, we're not going to tell you how to write, an episode of Gundam. But we can see how this franchise is kind of drifting. And we're going to put it back on course. And we're going to try something. The problem we have is with this timeline. It's kind of overfull of action in the sense you can't tell really huge world-changing stories with this anymore, unless you go away in the future. So what we're going to do is we're going to do some new TV series set in completely new timelines. We're going to reboot it. And we're going to do 3 of them, one after another, and see if they succeed. Their first attempt, and then we'll continue making OVAs and movies set in the original Universal Century timeline. So we can tell smaller stories, still big stories, but we can still tell stories in that for the fans of Universal Century, and kind of move those plots along in there as well. So, their first attempt was Mobile Fighter G Gundam.
Shining finger!
Yes! So, thing about that, when you make a hard science fiction franchise, and then you make something that looks like this, some fans are not happy. So G Gundam turned out to be quite controversial because it went back to the Super Robot archetype. This is a Super Robot show with a Gundam skin, if you will. I love G Gundam, but it took me 3 tries to watch G Gundam because I'd watch it and I was like, this is not Gundam. What are you doing? What is this? And then I realized it's a different take. You have to take it as it is and appreciate it. It is Dragon Ball Gundam. That's not quite accurate, but it is very much trying to be a ridiculous, fun, over-the-top, just big emotion melodramatic show. And so it found a fan base. A lot of folks in Japan liked the show, but it so fractured the Gundam fan base. They're like, this is not the right approach, unfortunately. It was fun, it was big, and the modern kits are still popular in Japan, but it just wasn't quite the right place to go. The third series that they tried was After War Gundam X. Thank you. I love Gundam X. It is a post-apocalyptic Gundam series. So those who haven't seen it, it's basically what would happen if Amuro Ray and White Base never showed up in the 1-year war, and that war continued to escalate. And it got worse and worse and worse, and it badly damaged Earth's biosphere to the point where there is more or less nuclear winter for multiple years after that war. And humanity kind of doesn't completely collapse. There are still cities and so forth, but it is very much people trying to kind of scrape together and survive after this horrible, horrible tragedy. And unfortunately, because that was a different take, because all these Gundam series were different takes, Gundam X kind of died on the vine. And Gundam X is also it tries to be a bit more middle ground in terms of it's not really aimed square at adults, not really aimed square at kids. It's more like a Saturday morning adventure series. It's a little bit lighter while also having dark moments. So unfortunately, it kind of didn't really work. But the middle series they tried was New World Report Gundam Wing. And apparently everyone here hates Gundam Wing. I'm joking. So with Gundam Wing, they said, okay, we have these giant robots. Giant robots are cool. But what if we made all the pilots hot teen boys? And so it was sort of the free of its day. And this interesting thing happened. Girls started watching. And they realized, hey, maybe if we appeal to half the human population, we can make more money. And we can be successful, and we can tell more interesting stories. Gundam Wing is also a rather politically complex anime series. Tons of factions that are constantly shifting back and forth, and this person is now in this faction and then changing over there. I started watching Gundam Wing around episode 20. I was so lost. And this caught people's attention. This was kind of a return to form in the sense of, oh, this is a show where I have to pay attention, where there's stuff happening and it's complex. And so this got both the the traditional mecha audience, traditional real robot audience, as well as the new female audience who's watching it for the hot boys who don't hang around with their girlfriends that much, but hang around with each other an awful lot. Katra and Troa. By the way, I was in a panel where they said, yeah, the scene between Katra and Troa was fan service. Like, we wanted the fans to see, oh, are they gay? Ooh, you know, that was just there for that reason. So it was kind of fun. So Gundam Wing was massive. Huge success in Japan and in America on Toonami. And suddenly Gundam was breaking into a big new market. You're like, okay, good. So we know this basic principle of having a new timeline with something that is more reminiscent of original Gundam can work. And I don't have a slide here for, oh well. So a few years later they started making Gundam 8th MS Team. Actually, I think they started with 8th MS Team before Wing. Am I right about that? Yeah, okay. It just took a long time for it to come out, so kind of, yeah, it kind of spanned that period. 8th MS Team was another one of these OVAs, sort of, that in the original Universal Century. And if you're looking to get into Gundam, 8th MS Team is a great place to start. It is a 10-episode OVA, and it manages to capture all the different basic elements of Gundam, all the kind of stereotypes and aspects of it, in this small war story about an individual unit. These are not special people in the traditional anime sense. They are random soldiers in a bad situation. And so again, this was very much getting back to that original idea of Gundam, of telling kind of a World War II drama about a future war. And it did extremely well. Unfortunately, the director passed away in the middle of making it, which is why it took so long for it to come out. It was finished by another director. By the way, it's why one of the reasons why the animation quality shifts in the last few episodes, because a new director came on and had a slightly different take on it. So yeah, 8th MS Team, it was not actually a massive success in Japan, but it was further proof that this model worked, of doing stories for the fans as OVAs, and we kind of move on from there and continue doing that. A few years later we got Gundam Seed, I think 2003? So, yeah. Whoops, one second. I'm pressing all the wrong buttons. One second, hello, there we go. So Gundam Seed is interesting because, as you all may have noticed, Gundam Seed got no reaction from this crowd. Gundam, thank you! Thank you! Ouch! I love Gundam Seed, but I love pretty much all Gundam. So Gundam Seed did a couple of interesting things. Unfortunately, Gundam Seed was one of those shows that was huge in Japan and did not do well in America. It just didn't really grab a lot of American fans. But Seed basically said, let's go back to some of the basic plot structure elements of original Gundam, but tell our own story in our own universe with it. So Gundam Seed is a story of essentially a race war. It is set in a timeline in which there is pervasive genetic engineering, and so all of these kids are being born with massive IQs and really strong bodies, and guess who gets in all of the best universities? And guess who gets all of the best jobs? And this causes a massive social upheaval and ends up in basically a war between the genetically superior people and the rest of the humans. And there's a great scene in here where somebody kind of throws a punch at one of these kids, and the kid throws him on the ground and says, I am objectively faster, stronger, and smarter than you, don't start. Basically. And then moves along, because it is true. Like, by any measure, these coordinators are better than us. And so it explores that question of how does society deal with it? How does somebody with those powers, with those abilities, live in society and be responsible with those abilities? And I should point out, some people say that Gundam Seed is just essentially reskinned original Gundam, that's overstating the case. There's a lot of new plot in Gundam Seed. It just takes some of the basic stuff. It has a white base equivalent, and they're going off on various fights. And Seed was so successful in Japan. It is certainly the most popular alternate timeline in Gundam. That's Universal Century. It sells the most model kits. That is a big thing. What's interesting, when they were making Gundam Seed, they said a lot of our staff coming into this show never watched original Gundam. They were too young for it. And so they were coming in where Gundam was this thing. It was this legendary thing that they were coming to be involved in Gundam Seed, which brought a kind of different take to the show. It was not a known franchise that was just kind of part of this industry they were playing with. It was this legendary thing that they finally got to play in and have fun with. So Seed, well, glowy anime unity, not a big thing. Not a big deal. So Seed further showed, okay, we can tell interesting stories in Gundam. If you haven't gotten into to Gundam yet, and you have, say, like a teenager that wants to get into Gundam, wants to get into like a full meaty Gundam series, Seed is not a bad place to start, partly because it looks new. One of the problems Gundam has, especially in America, is that a lot of modern anime fans, and I weep for them, cannot watch anime made more than 20 years ago. It looks bad to them. Traditional hand-drawn cell animation is bad in their eyes, and I want to slap them. Yeah, right, exactly. Gotta grow up real fast. I should do a video about that.
The problem is that people I think when people can watch old stuff, like 30-year-old movies they can watch,
yeah.
Gundam is like 60 episodes, 50 in a lot of places, and you can't really, that's why not people watch Legend of the Black Heroes, because that stuff's like over 100 episodes long.
Right.
It's one of the greatest anime of all time, if people watch it, they're not going to commit time to watching stuff at all.
That doesn't help. So at Bandai, there is an executive who is the chief Gundam officer. That is his actual title. It's awesome. And he said we have this problem with Gundam outside of Asia. Namely, it's hard for, say, Americans to get highly invested in a show about a protagonist that doesn't want to fight in the war. It's just not the kind of story we're used to, especially if you're 12. That's very foreign to your general kind of story. So he actually said, this was some years ago, that he said if I had unlimited time and budget, I would actually reanimate Mobile Suit Gundam in modern animation, and I think modern kids would watch it. Like that would be the way to fix that problem. Yeah. Because animation is one of the big issues. So, we'll see. Gundam Reorigin. So yeah, we'll see. A few years later, we got Gundam 00. Woo! Yep. So, 00, another new Gundam series, and there's one I don't have a slide in here for some reason, but I'll mention here in a minute. 00 was significant and important because besides being a new Gundam anime series for TV in a new timeline, it is set in Anno Domini. It is not a new counting system. It is meant to be our future, and the main characters are all terrorists. They all come in to stop war forever by intervening in conflicts. And oh, by the way, that young man on the far left was recruited as a child soldier for a Middle Eastern terrorist group, basically ISIS, just in the future. And there are scenes of him in the Middle East as a boy with a gun, doing very terrible things. So the Gundam suddenly was topical. Gundam up to this point had certainly been relevant, had been important, and had elements that were dealing with important parts of people's lives. But now Gundam was addressing things that we think about now, that we are concerned about in the modern context.
But was Gundam 00 really just the Gundam version of Full Metal Panic? Because Full Metal Panic had basically the same plot line that came out.
What?
7 or 8 years.
No. Panic has a very different plot line. Panic was actually inspired by Gundam Wing to some extent. No, the creator of Full Metal Panic has talked about his approach to that storyline. It's very different from where Double O goes. So I'm confused because I thought for sure I had a slide in here. We'll get to that in a second. But I need to talk about.
Hell yeah.
Yeah. We'll go with that slide. So, Turn A Gundam. It's about 1999. Just before Gundam, a few years before Gundam Seed. So Turn A Gundam was, one of the reasons I didn't mention it is that it kind of flopped in Japan. Fans just didn't really understand where Turn A Gundam was going. But Turn A Gundam was Tomino coming back to his franchise and making a new Gundam series as a 20th anniversary celebration. And it was basically him doing this to a lot of Gundam fans. Because basically, as he pointed out, Gundams, well, I mean, he didn't point out directly, but you can read between the lines. Gundam's central thesis is war is horrible, and we should avoid war as much as possible. And Gundam fans said, that's great, show us more war as much as possible. So Tomino made Turn A Gundam, it's true, where there is a big conflict, but there are no big space battles, there are no big land battles. It's basically a guerrilla war between a few small fighters. And it is a much more personal, intimate story about characters dealing with difficult situations. And it's about adults. Some of them are older teenagers, but it is about people dealing with being mature. It is very significant, the fact that the opening episodes of Turn A Gundam are about the main characters going through a coming of age ceremony. Meaning they have gone through that ceremony, they are now adults as far as society is concerned. So this is about being adult and being mature. It's a much more sophisticated story. I think that's what turned off some Gundam fans.